Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Douglas Henry Willie. Willie was shot and killed on Thursday, March 6, 2014 at the intersection of 97th and Main Street in the Broadway-Manchester neighborhood of South LA, according to LA County coroner records. Patrick Pearson, Deshaunda Young, and Desmond McMiller were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. On March 5, 2014, defendant McMiller put his belongings into Miss Bailey's gold Mercury Grand Marquis and drove the car away from her home in Las Vegas and traveled to Los Angeles. About 10:30 a.m. the next morning, victim Willie was gunned down at the intersection of 97th and Main Street by two men who emerged from the passenger side of a gold Mercury Grand Marquis. Among other injuries, the victim suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, 2 to the torso, several to the upper extremities, and 1 to the buttock. The totality of all the injuries led to the victim's death, probably within minutes of the shooting. Across the street, witness number 1 stood at her front door and called her dog inside. Witness 1 screamed when she heard the shots. The shorter of the 2 gunmen turned his gun toward her home and fired, hitting the residence. Witness number 2 was standing outside in a yard on the same block when the shooting began. Witness number 2 watched the shooting unfold from the time the 2 men emerged from the car until they got back in the car and sped away on 97th Street. At trial, witness 2 identified defendant McMiller as one of the shooters, and witness 1 identified both defendants McMiller and Pearson as the shooters. At the crime scene, investigators recovered 15 spent casings fired from 2 different guns. 4 of the casings were fired from a gun that used .40 caliber ammunition. The remaining 11 were consistent with ammunition fired from an AK-47 assault rifle. Several hours after the victim's murder, Detective Manuel Castañeda and Detective Nathan Corey stopped defendant Young at 97th and Hoover Street in Miss Bailey's Mercury Grand Marquis. Defendant Young was detained, questioned, and released. Miss Bailey's car was impounded. Defendant McMiller was the first person defendant Young called after her release. Detective Corey interviewed Miss Bailey on March 7, 2014, and Bailey identified clothing and other items recovered from the trunk of her car after the murders as defendant McMiller's. During the interview, Detective Corey asked Miss Bailey to call defendant McMiller, and she did. Among other things, defendant McMiller told Miss Bailey, "Don't fucking say nothing about me with that car," and that he was ducking in the trenches. As part of the investigation, the LAPD lifted fingerprints from the impounded Grand Marquis. All 3 defendants' fingerprints were on the car. On the morning of March 7, 2014, defendant McMiller spoke to Eric Washington about the murder. Washington's children, girlfriend, and 2 other friends were also present. Defendant McMiller told Washington that he, defendant Young, and defendant Pearson, all members of the Hoover criminal street gang, as was Washington, went into Main Street Crip territory in Bailey's Grand Marquis. Defendant McMiller told Washington the shooting was retaliation for the shooting of another Hoover criminal gang member that happened on March 6. Defendant McMiller identified defendant Young as the driver, and he told Washington Trey Monk, defendant Pearson, jumped out with the .40 Glock, shot the dude, and knocked him down. And he said he, defendant McMiller, jumped out with the chopper and chopped him up, and they jumped back in the car. Defendant McMiller was concerned about defendant Young having been pulled over the night before. He was scared that she was going to tell. Washington was arrested on March 9, 2014 on an unrelated matter. While in custody, he reached out to detectives to share what he had learned from defendant McMiller. Washington testified he reached out to detectives because on March 8th, he learned the victim was mentally disabled and was not a gang member. While he was in custody, Washington was attacked by other Hoover criminal gang members who accused him of cooperating with law enforcement and told him defendant McMiller had ordered the attack. Defendant's cell phone locations and activity before and after the murder were also featured prominently at trial. Defendants McMiller and Young's cell phones were used in Las Vegas between 6:04 p.m. and 7:37 p.m. on March 5th. The next activity on each of defendants' cell phones was in Los Angeles on the morning of March 6th. All 3 defendants' phones made or received multiple phone calls that accessed towers ranging from less than 1 mile to just over 2 miles away from 97th and Main Street. Defendant McMiller and Young were separately arrested on April 8, 2014. During defendant McMiller's arrest, Officers discovered a Mac 11 assault weapon in a bag on the rear passenger seat of the vehicle in which he was riding. Defendant Pearson was arrested on June 3rd. The people charged defendants in 11 counts. Defendants McMiller, Young, and Pearson were jointly charged in count 1 with murder, in count 2 with assault with a machine gun or assault weapon on a witness, in count 5 with shooting at an inhabited dwelling, and in count 6 with dissuading a witness by force or threat. Defendant McMiller was separately charged in counts 3 and 8 with 2 separate counts of possession of a firearm by a felon, in count 7 with possession of an assault weapon, in count 9 with dissuading a witness from testifying, in counts 10 and 11 with conspiracy to commit witness intimidation. Defendant Pearson was separately charged in count 4 with possession of a firearm by a felon. Following the trial, on September 29, 2015, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts against all defendants. The jury determined that the murder was in first degree and found true all the gun and gang enhancements. The court sentenced defendant Pearson to a total of 72 years to life. Defendant Young was sentenced to a total of 65 years to life, and defendant McMiller was sentenced to a total of 161 years and 4 months to life. Douglas Henry Woolley was 27 years old at the time of death.